Welcome to Marvel Champions Podcast, a podcast about Marvel Champions, the card game. I am your host, Scott, and with me, as always, my co host, Ryan.
It is good to be back.
All right, Ryan, I think today is going to be a fun little episode. It's going to be called Don't Forget to Tip the Player, or Tip the Player, something like that.
And we're still fishing around for the right phrase for the podcast name, or not podcast name, but the episode name.
Yeah, we had tossed around a few different ones, and it's still a work in progress. But we didn't want that to stop us from getting out some good content. So with Tip the Player, we want to talk about a couple tips that have helped us as we've went along our journey with Marvel Champion. And this could be if you're new, if you're first starting out, you haven't played in a while, picking it back up. I know the X-Men kind of relit a fire for some people, and or if you play all the time and just like to refresh yourself on some tips and tricks, I think this will be a good little episode.
Yeah, and these aren't like expert player awesome tips. These are just solid tips to always keep in mind when you're playing the game, kind of thing.
Yeah, just to kind of make them more fun, because if we direct it a little more towards if you're more of a novice player, it can be a little overwhelming or frustrating at times as you're
Oh,
getting into the game.
oh yeah, for sure. And that's exactly what my tip is going to be about. So, you mind if I start off?
No, feel free. You
All
can
right.
tip us off.
Oh boy, here we go. So my tip for the players is understand the scenario. And what I mean by that is understanding who you're playing, who you're playing against, and the nuances of the game. So, first thing to consider is, are you playing true solo with only one hero, or are there multiple heroes? Because that does kind of affect how you should build a deck, or which hero you make, and what villain to face, and how difficult it's going to be. Because I'm sure we've all, if you've played Marvel Champions, have gone through a Rhino scenario where he all of a sudden gets an advance and the game ends instantly. Um, so it's situations like that where you want to kind of understand the cards you're playing with. Um, and so along with that is what villain you're playing against. Are you playing against a villain that's heavy minion, or is a lot of big attacks, or is all about thwart? And then who's the hero you're playing against that? If you're playing a hero or playing a villain that has tons of thwarting that needs to be done, and you play as Valkyrie, you're gonna have a good chance of losing. So it's really just kind of understanding the the game you're wanting to play to prevent frustrations. Um, I think that really is a key in just starting off on just a fun experience of Marvel Champions rather than a frustrating experience of Marvel Champions.
So let me ask you a question. Do you, as a player, typically like to pick your villain first and then have your hero kind of geared towards what that villain is trying to accomplish? Or do you pick your hero first and then try and pick a villain that's either going to be successful or really be a challenge for you?
I think it's evolved as I've played the game. Um, I think in general, if there isn't like a new hero um, out or anything, I would generally choose the villain, and then I'll choose the hero that I think would be the most fun. Um, so, for example, I probably am not going to play Collector 2 with a hero that doesn't thwart very well, because that's what that scenario is all about. It's about thwarting, and it just wouldn't be fun to play a hero that's just struggles. Maybe that's a challenge for some people, and by all means go for it. But for me, I'm about having fun, not necessarily the massive challenge of beating every villain with every hero with every aspect. at every difficulty level. Um, but I definitely have had times where I've thought of deck ideas and I'm like, oh, I want to try this. I think this will be a villain that'd be fun against. Um, and I think normally when we play, we generally find the villains that we gravitate towards, and we just kind of sometimes we've done random heroes, and that's been fun. It's also been frustrating. So it really determines or really depends on how we're feeling and where we're at. But it's always on my mind of if I'm going to play this villain or I'm going to be this hero, I don't want a villain or hero that's going to just make it unfun. Hence why we don't play Ronin very often.
Yeah, I think with me and you, we usually try and like look at how much time do we have, or what are we trying to accomplish? Like, are we just gonna have a fun pickup game? Or what I especially like is when a new expansion box comes out, we are very like serious focused when we're playing through that the first time. Like we're trying to beat it and go through each scenario and really focus in on that new experience that we haven't had before.
Hmm.
And then there's times where we're just like, I only got like 45 minutes to an hour. Let's just do this quick game and go pick a random kind of pre-made deck with a hero that I've been thinking about and just run with it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think because you and me play, most of our games are just you and me. Um, we can balance each other. So if you want to play a hero that's very aggressive and attack, and I can be a more thwart type hero. And at that point, it almost doesn't matter what villain we play against. We balance each other, which balances the game. But it can be frustrating when you have a favorite hero and they're kind of a niche hero that's not very good at a certain thing, and that can make it difficult to play the game. Like I'm sure a lot of like Thor fans. Um, I think that as a hero, I think he's can be really fun. He's very strong, but he can be frustrating for more thwart centered scenarios or true solo for some players.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the fun with the game too is
Hmm.
for me is can I take that challenge? You know, and there's all sorts of different guys out there that will take somebody and then, show off an amazing deck and an amazing game, and it's really cool to watch. Um, and then there's sometimes you play a character and they just do not click with you or your play style. I think that has a little bit to do with it too. Is not every hero is for every player.
Yep, absolutely. We've definitely have encountered that. Like for me, I think Black Widow's cool. But for some reason, I've never been able to have her work for me. But like Miss Marvel, I've had her be amazing, and I really like her. She's one of my favorites, and she clicks. Her deck just clicks for me.
So my player like that, or my character that, no matter how many times I've tried to play, it's just been a miserable experience, and I just wanted to like swoosh the game off into the trash can. Is Star Lord? I
Oh,
cannot make Star Lord work ever.
yeah, and that's what the beauty of the game too is. I know a lot of people that like Star Lord. Like I don't mind Star Lord. But that risk reward, I think a lot of people like. But I mean, if you don't like them, go to the next hero, play them, and it'll all work out in the end.
Yeah, that's exactly. I am a pseudo completionist, so obviously I got him and I played him, but he's one that collects a lot of dust in my box.
Hmm. Yep, yep. But that's my tip is just understand your scenario and make sure you're not making yourself frustrated by the heroes and villains you're choosing. Just, it's okay to experiment and stuff. That's how you learn the game, but just understanding that if you're not winning with Hulk or with um Star Lord or Black Widow, maybe change a hero, change the villain, and try to make it work. um, by just practicing and seeing what you're good at and what you like, and there you go.
And after a couple cycles, they could have new cards that may help them,
Hmm.
and you might revisit them and have a totally different experience. So that's some good advice.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. I think there's a lot of heroes that haven't been as good, but with newer cards, they've been able to turn around where they're more playable and more enjoyable for sure.
All right, so my tip, and I think mine's going to be a little more focused on newer players. Obviously, can help all of us because sometimes we think we know, uh, but sometimes we don't. And that is to read the card or read a status card the way it's printed. And don't be afraid to like have the um, quick start guide or rules right there next to you to truly understand what an icon means or the phrasing of something. Because I think sometimes we can think we know what a certain thing does, but it doesn't really function the way we think it does. Um, so, like the first one for me when I first started um, was like a stunned or a confused, and like reading the card. So it says the next time this character would attack, discard this status card instead. And that can work off of a hero or a villain. And I think sometimes with a villain, it's easy to get confused on what an activation means for them and how that interacts with stun. Um, how when they are stunned, they don't activate. Instead of activating, that stun is replacing that attack or a confuse with a thwart. Because even on the confused, it has both things. It has thwart and scheme. One thing the hero does, one thing the villain does. Some other things that I wanted to pull up are like what the different icons mean, or some keywords like guard or patrol. Like patrol, if I know it correctly, means that you can't thwart the main scheme, but it does not mean that you can't remove threat from the main scheme.
Whereas I think I can't remember the name of it, the exclamation.
Crisis icon.
Thank you. It specifically says that threat cannot be removed from the main scheme.
Right. Right. So there's all those little kind of nuancy things, especially when you're starting, and it's a lot to remember. So why burden yourself trying to have a perfect memory when you just need to have those references right there with you?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. I think if you play an entire game without making a single mistake, I think that's a miracle. There's always these little things. There's so much counters being thrown around, cards being played, different scenarios that are or circumstances that are happening with the interaction between the villain and the hero that you're gonna make small mistakes, and that's okay.
right. So like one we we'll admit it, we played wrong. Because they bring out, they're always evolving the game. Was the amplify icon,
Oh
and that's the
yeah.
one where it like adds one additional boost icon
Mm-hmm.
to those encounter cards,
Yep.
but it specifically says that it's when it's for a boost card.
Yep.
And I think we were playing Scarlet Witch, and we messed that one up because we thought when any of those cards were turned up, um, it was going to add one.
Yep.
So let me read what it says. It says amplify icon. It says the amplify icon represents various forces that are empowering or bolstering the villain. When a boost card is turned face up during an enemy activation, and it's even like bolded, add one additional boost icon to that card for each amplify icon in play. So that really could affect how you play the game. So if you were playing it wrong, like we were, it made it almost a little easier because it made her how many icons were on there, or if it was one of those where it's like flip the card and do X additional damage based off the icons. It really wasn't adding that one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's not the only one we've made for sure. Because you you kind of just get into the rut of the game, and you just kind of just go with it instead of kind of referencing back to those rules and being like, you know what, I need to check on this instead of just assuming. Um, so reading is important, and even like with player cards, I mean, we've had this discussion on one of our rules episodes where the way you read the hero card kind of determined about cost and if a stun would be interacted with it. And so it's really important to kind of line by line, sentence by sentence, read the card.
Yeah, and I think another one that is like an interaction thing is understanding and knowing the difference between like a interrupt and a response, and a forced interrupt and a forced response,
Mm-hmm.
and almost like a hierarchy of sequencing on those, like what gets priority, what goes first, those kind of things.
Yeah. I mean, this game is complicated. I mean, it sounds easy. And I guess if you take away all the keywords and all those little things like response and stuff, the game is pretty straightforward. You play cards from your hand, you deal damage, you do some thwart, and you do it until the villain's gone. And then the villain hurts you. That's the bare bones of the game. But when you add those responses and interrupts and traits and timing elements of all these things, it becomes a lot, especially for a new player.
Yeah, and I think it can be overwhelming and frustrating to where you just want to stop. But my other advice with like new players like that is, even if you make mistakes, just keep going, because each game after that is just going to be that much easier for you. And then as that easiness of the rules goes up, the amount of fun you're going to start having is going to go up as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always helpful to play with other players because they can help catch those rules as well that you might miss or that they might miss and you catch kind of thing. 'Cause that's happened plenty of times in our games.
Yeah, I mean, I'll watch some of the content creators and be like, "You did that sequencing wrong." To myself, obviously, I'm not like calling them out, but I'm like, "You did that sequencing wrong." Like one, um, when you're like creating the villain, setting up the villain, the very last thing you do is shuffle in your obligations. Um, if you're playing a villain that makes you like discard something, like Claw, for example, you discard until you get a minion as part of his setup. If you put in your obligation too soon, you can discard that, and you're technically making your game potential a little easier. So
Yeah, yeah.
just
But
follow those player cards too. Those player reference cards are nice little kind of just step by step. Do one. Okay, I did everything on one. Do two. Did everything on two. Especially when it comes to like the setup and villain stage and stuff.
yeah, for sure. All right on, man. Any other thoughts on that?
Nope. I was just, you were talking about the rules and all that, and it's like a 45-page document, so nobody knows it all. Like you said, if you're able to, find somebody that plays, go to a game store that may sell the game, and um, find somebody to play with.
Yeah,
Um, the Facebook community is awesome. Everyone's always asking questions, and 99% of the time, everybody's real cool about it, and want to see people enjoy the game and get into the game. So
yeah, yeah. And I mean, if you have the time, which Time is a very precious resource, but man, hey, if you're going to the bathroom, sit on that toilet, pop open the rules, and boom, you can just sit there and read. Yeah, I mean, you're on your phone anyways, right?
Right. Right. Might as well do something productive.
There you go. So, well, cool.
All right. Well, hopefully some of these tips help somebody out, or you just listen for some fun. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Don't Forget to Tip the Player. Thanks everyone for listening. You can reach out to us at marvelchampionspod@gmail.com. Feel free to send us any content ideas or questions, something you'd like to hear us talk about. If you have a combo that you want us to feature, feel free to send that over our way, and we'll see what we can do about getting that into an episode. All right, Ryan. Let's wrap it up. If you want to go from a chump to a champ, listen to the Marvel Champions podcast. See ya.
Take care.